Hello, I'm Zak Coleman. I'm the new undergraduate president on the Cambridge University Students' Union for this year, and I'm here with Senior Pro-Vice-Chancellor Graham Virgo, and I'm here to have a conversation about the upcoming year, plans for Michelmas Term and beyond, and some of the issues that students care most about. So Graham, thank you so much for speaking with me today about some of the big issues facing students as we head into the new academic year. I want to start specifically with COVID-related plans for the new term and the year ahead, and then turn to some of the other major issues that students will be keen to see the university focusing on this year. So I thought we could start with plans for Michelmas Term. Studying during the pandemic has obviously been incredibly brutal for students, with supervisions, seminars, labs and exams all moving online. Students moving into their third year have barely experienced a normal Cambridge term, and many students have been frustrated that their college, and in some cases the university, have in some cases gone well beyond government guidelines in their COVID policies. How does the university plan on ensuring that students have a safe but also a fulfilling and meaningful experience this academic year and are well supported in the transition, which might be a difficult transition back to a more typical in-person learning environment?
Well, first of all, Zach, I'm well aware that students have had a really tough time during the pandemic. So it's 18 months. If we cast our mind back to March 2020 and we flipped suddenly to online teaching, online exams, and then last academic year was not what any of us wanted it to be. At the heart of what we have been doing is looking after the safety of students and of staff, but doing all we can to make sure that the education is the best it can possibly be in really challenging circumstances. So there is an excitement at the moment about the coming academic year. I'm excited to see students coming back to Cambridge. We want the education at Cambridge, again, to be the best it can be, but we've got to bear in mind we are still in a pandemic. COVID has not gone, and therefore we've got to manage issues of safety relating to students and staff as well. So we've been saying we want students to come back to Cambridge, and the vast majority of students will be coming back into residence. And that is at the heart of degrees at Cambridge, living in Cambridge, studying in person. And we want there to be as much in-person teaching as possible. But we have said, because of safety, because of managing ventilation, etc., there are going to have to be some restrictions in place. And that's why some lectures are going to have to be online, at least for Michelmas Term. Our planning, we are of course planning for Lent and Easter, but we're waiting to see how things develop with public health situation, for example. But also we have learnt from the experience of the last 18 months, and I get really cross with some of the political interventions and some of the statements in the media assuming that it is only possible to teach at university in person. In person is really important. I mean, I supervise, I lecture, and that in-person experience matters. But we know that sometimes putting stuff online, maybe in advance of a lecture, and then what's called flipping the classroom, is a really good way of conveying the information in advance and then having the lecture or seminar based on it. So we are not saying everything is going back to what we did pre-COVID. We want to learn from the challenging experience to actually make sure that we learn from that and that can improve the education.
Absolutely, and I mean, I actually, that was going to be one of my questions, was the development of online delivery of teaching actually, even beyond the pandemic context, does have particular benefits for making education at Cambridge much more accessible, particularly actually for disabled students. So even as we move back to much more in-person teaching, can you reassure these students that these options for online delivery, like online lectures and seminars, will remain in place now that we do have that infrastructure to do so?
Yeah, so the big issue I think there is with recorded lectures. Before the pandemic, a long time ago, we were piloting lecture capture, as we call it, and there were some subjects that had it. Some subjects were a little bit more concerned about it and weren't going with it. I think views have changed completely on that, and the norm will be recording of lectures. Now, there are some limitations on that, but the lecturers have to be happy with that and give permission. Now, there will be situations where students with a particular disability must have recorded lectures, and that will happen anyway. But a big part of this is certainly the inclusive experience. And if we can have the vast majority of lectures recorded, we don't need to make particular provision for students who have particular needs for recorded lectures. So we want that to continue. I will say we are set up for recorded lectures at the start of the academic year. I've recently had a meeting where we were looking at some of the difficulties with the really good recorded material. There is a shortage of microphones around the country and the world, and we are getting them, and actually we will get them in place, we think, by the end of October. So recorded lectures will happen. I think as we go through the term, the quality will improve. Seminars can be recorded, but we do move into a bit more of a difficult area, because we don't want, seminars and supervisions where free discussion is really important. Sometimes it's just not appropriate to record that. And then if people are not able to participate, we need to find ways to ensure that they can engage with the material in some other way.
I think that will be really reassuring to a lot of students, so thank you so much for that. So to turn to a slightly different facet of the area of kind of accessibility and education, one of the major barriers to ensuring that postgraduate study is accessible to students from more underrepresented backgrounds, which is an area that I think the university is starting to look at much more seriously, is the postgraduate application fee, which currently stands, I think, at £75. Now, not to kind of invoke the old Oxbridge rivalry, but Oxford has recently committed to abolishing this fee. And so very specifically on the postgraduate application fee, is this something that you'd like to see Cambridge follow suit on? And slightly more broadly, what is the university doing? Could you give us a bit of an overview on improving postgraduate access?
Yeah, so look, we are taking postgraduate widening participation and access very seriously. Let me answer specifically the point about the application fee, because I know it is controversial and it's a live issue. I'm well aware of what happened in Oxford last year, and they are committed over time to getting rid of the application fee, as are a number of other universities as well. The way this university works, Pro-Vice-Chancellor can't say, I'm getting rid of the application fee and that's it. But I have committed, and I'm happy to confirm this now, that this term, we have a particular committee, the Postgraduate Admissions Committee. I have committed to this being an issue that will be discussed at that committee with a view to seeing what the response is. But if the recommendation is that the application fee goes, then we will act on that. So absolute commitment. This is a live issue and we are not ducking it. We're going to engage with it. I will say, we do indeed have the application fee, £75. We do have various schemes in place to mitigate the impact of that for access reasons. So actually, applicants from overseas, from actually quite a long list of countries, do not pay the fee. And we also have a fee waiver, an application fee waiver system for home students, where their financial circumstances are such that it's not appropriate for them to be charged the fee. And it's important to note that we don't just charge the fee and don't think about the consequences. But I do take widening participation across the board really seriously, and particularly postgraduates, and I say particularly because it has been off the political agenda and actually off the agenda of most universities. We are ahead of the field in that we appointed 2 years ago somebody whose sole responsibility is to look at postgraduate widening participation. And we are really thinking hard, identifying schemes to enable us to do what we do with undergraduates, but for postgraduate students. And a big part of this discussion is we have what is called a really leaky pipeline. So we are doing a lot at Cambridge, for example, to improve widening participation at undergraduate level. Always more to do, but we've made big strides. What we are finding then is the successes are carrying through at undergraduate level, and there are students who at Cambridge want to go on to postgraduate study and can't for financial reasons. But also students at other universities who want to come to Cambridge and should come to Cambridge but can't. And we need to plug this leaky pipeline. And there are various ways of doing it, and it's not just simply a matter of putting more money into the system for bursaries and studentships, although that's really important. It's also raising profile of Cambridge and saying, yeah, we are open for postgraduate students regardless of your background.
That's really great to hear, and it's something that the SU will be prioritising this year as well, so I'm sure we'll have lots of off-camera conversations to work together on that. Thank you. So amongst students, it's sort of a broadly accepted fact that the traditional structure of the Cambridge term, packing an extraordinary amount of content into just 8 weeks, has a really detrimental impact on general well-being and student mental health. And I know the university is very aware of that. We've got this really exciting mental health strategy which is being developed at the moment that's focusing broadly around kind of service provision and how we can make that work better for students. And there's a lot of exciting stuff coming out of that process. But on the more structural kind of underlying side, the SU has, as you know, been pushing for the introduction of a week 5 reading week and a full freshers week. Is that something that you would welcome?
So, on student mental health and wellbeing, you're right, there's a lot going on, and one of the big issues as part of that is student workload. And so I just want to emphasise, I'm aware of that. I take the concerns relating to that very seriously. I've been in my Pro-Vice-Chancellor role now for 7 years, so quite a long time. When I started, we did have a review of student workload, and the possibility of introducing a reading week came up and was not pursued. I am well aware this is a live issue. I mean, I know you had this as a manifesto commitment, and you are fully committed to this. This is another example where me as Pro-Vice-Chancellor cannot say Cambridge is going to have a reading week and that will happen. What I can say is I have changed my mind over the last few years. I was neutral before, and I'm now in favour of a reading week. And so, yeah, the Freshers' Week, and making sure that the Freshers' Week is as supportive for transition from school to university as possible. But particularly as regards the reading week, I am supportive of that. Now, there's a lot of detail we need to thrash out, and I can't just say, that's it, it's happening. We've got to go through the colleges and the university processes, but I am committed to that discussion happening. And I think that will be an important issue over the next year.
And I think that we're doing a lot of really productive work around this in the Reading Week Working Group, and I think there'll be further consultation with colleges and other sort of stakeholders within the university community. But I think if we can manage to pull it off alongside a lot of the recommendations in the student mental health and wellbeing strategy that's being developed, it could be really revolutionary for mental health and wellbeing at Cambridge.
Absolutely. And I think it is important to link the wider discussions about student mental health and wellbeing with workload. And I am clear that, and we've got a lot of evidence that managing workload is really important for student mental health, but also just for the success and enjoyment of their education at Cambridge. And Reading Week comes into that.
And I think students really feel that there's so much on offer here. I mean, the societies that we have and the facilities for sport, drama, whatever else you want to get involved in are so incredible that to have a bit of a pause in the kind of work aspect of being at Cambridge would just help that flourish even further. And I think that's something that would be really positive. So thank you for that. Another issue that students care hugely about is the climate emergency. And students were really encouraged by the university's recent decision to divest from fossil fuels. But Cambridge does still have major research links with worst offending polluters. So the Shell Professor of Chemical Engineering, the BP Institute, and association with Cambridge's global reputation. I mean, we're so respected and we're so at the forefront of climate research in so many ways. That association does help these companies enormously to portray themselves as committed to a just transition, even as they do continue to expand their fossil fuel operations. So as the wealthiest university in Europe, and at a time when institutions everywhere really need to act more boldly than ever to avert runaway climate breakdown, how do we stop ourselves being used by these companies to what a lot of people would describe as greenwash their appalling environmental records?
So look, these are difficult issues. I'm going to correct you first just to say that staff at the University of Cambridge and me and the Vice-Chancellor, everybody I come across are concerned about climate crisis and all the issues relating to it. I too am delighted with the decision a year ago relating to divestment and everything else related to it. It wasn't just that, there were other things as well. Now, when it comes to research, these are difficult issues, and I have to say academic freedom is vitally important, and it is important that our researchers are engaging with companies and with their research as they wish to do so. Their freedom to do so is important. Now, of course, there is an institutional element to this as well as regards engaging with a wide variety of companies, fossil fuel and otherwise. What I would say is, and I really must emphasize the academic freedom point, it is also important that this university, through its research, engages with what we need to do for a net zero future. We can talk about climate repair, etc. And that requires investment, that requires funding, and that requires partnership. And sometimes the most appropriate partners are those who have been engaging in fossil fuel extraction. They need to look ahead to the near future, and we are looking at a completely different approach to energy, etc. So I am not going to be sitting here saying we are not going to be doing that, but we need to look really carefully at why we're doing it, what we're doing. It can't be greenwashing. It's got to be right at the heart of what the university is standing for. It's looking to the future and what we need to do to make sure that we have a carbon zero future.
Another area that students care deeply about and that has been part of the national conversation recently, and in Cambridge very recently there was a racist attack against a Cambridge alumnus on Mill Road. And I think that very disturbing case does demonstrate that racism, there is an enduring presence of racism in our society, in our city, and in our university. So I guess, what more do you think the university needs to do, what is it doing already, to ensure that Cambridge is an actively anti-racist institution, which is committed to rooting out these kind of really appalling beliefs and actions?
So first of all, the university's commitment to anti-racism is clear. I have said on many occasions, I want us to adopt a zero tolerance attitude. There have recently been some very concerning, distressing incidents. Those were incidents against Cambridge students and against Cambridge alumni. My understanding is by people from outside the university, appalling, hate crime, etc. But it is really important that the university, working with the colleges, does all it can do, we can do, to ensure the safety of our students. So that's absolutely clear. I mean, your question did refer, though, to racism within the university as well, and I have come across appalling examples of that. And we need to call that out. Sometimes we need to engage directly with people and explain to them, perhaps through their own ignorance, as to why what they have said, what they have done, is totally inappropriate. But I think it's a really good example of where there needs to be a genuine partnership throughout the whole of the collegiate university, with academics, with Pro-Vice-Chancellors, with students, to have a consistent message and to ensure that all of our students feel properly supported. So we are doing there are all sorts of initiatives. The recent launch of the Black Student Advisory Hub, for example, is just one way where I hope we will be able to provide a network of support and a forum for much better understanding and engagement about racist issues and our response to them. But I'm always open to hear ideas, particularly from students, as to other things we need to do.
Well, one thing that a lot of the sabbatical officers for this year put in their manifestos was looking again at anti-racism training for pastoral staff and particularly student-facing staff, but I think across the university more broadly there's relevance, and that's not to say that students don't also need very robust anti-racism awareness training, which I know lots of JNMCRs do already do. But is that something that you'd be interested in exploring? And
absolutely, and I have said before that we need that training across the piece. I mean, yeah, particularly student-facing staff, but actually across the piece. We shouldn't have to do it, but we need it. And when I say across the piece, I mean university, faculties, departments, and colleges as well. And I have talked to colleges about the need for that training, and I know there's a lot of discussion about it.
And I think that will help a lot in our efforts to attract students from all backgrounds and underrepresented BME students, for example, because if we can show that we're taking racism within the university seriously and having a no complacency policy, then I think that will help a lot, although there's been very exciting strides made in that area already. Another issue that is sort of looming for all of us this term is the possibility of strike action over pensions and pay. So given that the proposed changes to the USS pension scheme will drastically reduce the level of guaranteed retirement income provided to members of USS, and that pay has been reducing now for several years, I think we can all understand why staff sometimes reluctantly feel that they may have no choice but to consider strike action. What is the university doing to ensure that staff concerns are listened to and that the need for strikes, which will be hugely disruptive for students in the university and none of us want, is avoided?
Yeah, so strikes would be hugely disruptive for students and for staff as well, of course, and particularly students who've gone through so much over the last 2 years in particular. Look, the issue particularly relating to pensions, but also relating to issues relating to salary and gender pay gap, etc. These are complicated. We take these issues really, really seriously at the university. Part of the complexity is that issues about pensions are not just in Cambridge, across many universities, and likewise salary negotiation is across much of the sector. What I will say as regards pensions in particular is I think it is a really good example where the university is working closely with UCU, the University and Colleges Union. And we all know that the existing pension arrangements are not sustainable. Something must be done to sort this out. This is a problem that's been going on for years, and the can has been kicked down the road. We actually have published a statement that was University of Cambridge and UCU, actually with Oxford as well, suggesting a way forward. We all have concerns about governance of pensions, and this gets horribly technical really quickly, but there is something, and I'm not going to define it because it gets very complicated, but something called conditional indexation. That we think, so this is university and union, this is something we should all be seriously looking at. And I am hoping that that open engagement is the right way forward. And I would like to see that across the sector as a way, it's going to take time, but if we could move to that over the next period, that could really change things for the better.
So finally, to close, the Vice-Chancellor has just announced his intention to end his term at the end of this academic year. There has been some media criticism on a variety of counts, one of which has surrounded the report and support platform, which I think students broadly welcomed as a sign that actually the university was taking issues of discrimination and mistreatment really seriously. Could you reassure students that growing efforts by right-wing media outlets to kind of caricature really these what are often very sensible policies will not result in Cambridge deprioritising important anti-racism? I know you've already, in your previous answers, kind of reassured me on that, but won't result in the university deprioritising important anti-racism and equality work. And just more broadly, would you like to give your own assessment of the Vice-Chancellor's kind of time in office and just give us your thoughts there as well?
Well, so the Vice-Chancellor's time in office continues for another academic year, and I have spoken to him about what was a very difficult decision for him. He has said what the reason for that decision was, relating to the impact of COVID and the fact that his family are in Canada and many of his friends are in Canada. But he is committed to the university for the next year. He is committed, as am I, to freedom of speech and academic freedom fundamentally. And some of the media coverage has been really unfair, inappropriate,
personal.
Absolutely, it's been personal, and it's been an untrue caricature because the Vice-Chancellor, as I say, is committed to freedom of speech, but also, like me, committed to anti-racism, to equality, to diversity, and to inclusivity. And frankly, even though there is the odd voice from within the University of Cambridge who have received some publicity about their objections to the Vice-Chancellor, I know from the messages he's received from staff and from students, and also messages I've seen from staff and students, show that the Vice-Chancellor continues to be held in really high regard at this university. He has the full confidence of the senior leadership team, and we are committed to carrying on this really important work for the university, for its staff and its students over the next year. It's going to be an exciting year. It's going to be difficult. As I said earlier on, the pandemic is still happening, and we're all going to have to work together and look out for each other and look after each other. But frankly, if we can all do that together, I'm hopeful that this could be a really good year for the University of Cambridge.
Well, Graham, thank you so much for your time. I think we've covered a lot of ground. We could probably go on for another few hours about all of the different issues within the university, but this has been really, really helpful, and thank you so much.
Thank you very much.